Looks like we're live, everyone. So I'll kick us off. I'm Dave Foley, your host today and VP of Sales at Wade & Wendy. And we're here today to talk about the business case for recruiting tech. So not surprised, I've been listening to all the sessions so far today. Not surprising, a lot of common themes are coming up. We'll probably end up getting to some of them here as well, from change management to tech prioritization, bias considerations, scale considerations, integrations, candidate experience, distributed hiring. So all that said, I first want to get us started with introductions. So why don't we have Bob, you kick us off?
Great. Hey, Dave, and thanks for having us. I'm Bob Toohey. I am the president of Pymetrics. Jason?
Hey. Hi, everyone. Jason Lorenz. I'm HR strategy and digital lead for Johnson & Johnson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jerome Ternynck, founder and CEO at Smart Recruiters.
Cool. Thanks, guys, for joining the panel, and happy Thursday. So to get us started, I think it's probably fair to just frame it out a little bit. As we all know, a strong business case clearly points to a really strong ROI and expected business impact. But it sometimes takes a village and a lot of work. And some of those examples are obviously collaboration between buyers and sellers, managing multiple stakeholders, recruiters, hiring managers, applicant expectations, tech teams, legal, infosec, and of course, budgeting and financial impact, particularly in this climate. So kind of with all of that said, I'd love to kind of kick it off with Jerome. And Jerome, based on what I said, or more broadly, what resonates with you based on what you've experienced in your career, particularly in this current environment?
I think there's a paradox here because for the last, decades, right? TA leaders have been meaning to upgrade their technology and drive efficiency, but they just didn't have the time, right? They were just busy filling recs. And now they have the time. In many cases, hiring volumes are low or stopped, but they don't have the money, right? Which is kind of a paradox, right? And so I think what we're going to talk about today is actually, how do you convince the CFO that modernizing the TA tech is exactly what you should be doing right now when your TA volumes are low? Because at the end of the day, your TA tech, it's like the engine of the car, right? It's a lot easier to upgrade when the car is parked. And I think that's the key question is yes. And we hear a lot of that. We hear a lot of TA leaders are like, yeah, I want to do that. Then they go, how am I going to convince the C-suite? And I hope that's what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. Jason, you sit in the center of this at J&J. How do you think about what Jerome just said, and just more broadly, how are you dealing with the current situation?
Yeah, I think he's spot on, right? We're getting a breath for the first time in a while, right? We're slowing down, we're resetting, we're evaluating, we're applying governance and really making smart decisions that are going to return an investment. We're looking at the experience, we're looking at our efficiency, and ultimately excellence. So we're focused on the 3 E's, and now's the time that's allowing us that breath to take a step back, look at the environment, and make sound decisions.
Awesome. And then Bob, I think you bring an interesting perspective, having both been a CHRO and then currently as president of Pymetrics. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, kind of echoing both what Jason and Jerome said, and I like the 3 E's, Jason, how you kind of laid that out. And I think everybody's going for efficiency, but I think the top line is that we know we have time, but we also have a lot of opportunity for change. Just given what's going on in the world and COVID, I think, kind of balancing off what Jerome said, technology, the advancements that are going on now are probably happening faster than we ever expected. And I think this gives HR, the community, a great opportunity to kind of step in front of that, because even, my experience, when you see the budgets, oftentimes HR kind of falls lower than some others. And you start to look at that. Now's the time to, 1, try new things. 2, you can really take the time to replace that tech quickly and pivot fast. And then to start show those efficiencies, kind of go back to the 3 E's Jason talked about. We all talk about efficiency and where can you drive cost out. And I think showing the CFO the value immediately, not the value in 3 years. How do we kind of help them do that? You have a short-term and a long-term value.
Yeah.
But I think that's key is what's the immediate impact? I think you could show efficiencies, but then you start building it on. You're going to start seeing quality of hire. You're going to start seeing better engagement. You're going to start seeing better experiences. And those are the longer tail ones. But I think marrying the 2, immediate and then long-term, help a lot when you kind of think about putting the business case together.
Yeah. The last time that I led TA functions for about a decade. The last time was in 2008, 2009 with the last recession, and kind of felt that pain. And so one of the biggest challenges is to figure out how do you make this innovation and investment with limited and fewer resources than you've had before. So how, let's say, maybe Jason, how are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's about fewer resources at this point, Dave, or not. I think it's about putting our resources to focus on rebuilding the foundation and applying our guiding principles of how we want to advance our solutions, right? And you heard me before say step back. I think we're really taking a strategic step back to put our resources to some of the operational foundational elements that are going to help us get to where we need to get to. And as Jerome was highlighting, we were moving so fast, we didn't get the opportunity to do that, right? Yeah. It would go faster. And so I think we're putting our resources to foundations and clean up and optimizing what we have to get us to that future state.
Yeah, leaning into that just a little bit, like how are you looking at current teams where they may have, and I'm not going to say they do have because I don't want to assume, different levels of bandwidth and priorities. Like how are teams redistributing like resources and work and things like that today from your standpoint?
Yeah, listen, I think we're all working in a period here where we'll have to lean in and help out a little bit more. Our teams are really teams and collaborating and accelerating how fast. At times we're stepping out of our comfort zone, which is a little bit of a uncomfortable feeling because we like to come back to what we know. And so seeing the teams come together, seeing people pitch in, carry, having more respect for what's going on for our colleagues and the situations they're in. I think that's where the teamwork's really coming together.
Awesome. Hey, Jerome and Bob, from a client perspective, meaning working with your clients and prospects, what are you guys hearing and seeing from the world?
I think, I think there's the leaning in part is a big one. And I think TA leaders can lean in a few ways. Obviously, they can upgrade their tech and do that, and we'll talk more about this. But other ways they can lean in is, one, they can actually step up to own internal hiring. In many organizations, internal mobility is a little bit more HR, TA is a little bit more external. Well, right now, over the next couple of years, we're going to really prioritize internal hiring. And I think we should deploy the whole TA skill set, toolkit, expertise to how do we market jobs to our own employees so that we don't hire anybody externally if we have the right person laying somewhere internally. That's one. And two, I really like the example of Airbnb, where in the wave of layoffs, Brian, the CEO, actually turned their TA team into alumni placement agents. And I think to the extent that you can afford it, having your TA team lean in to help as placement agents. We are recruiters. As recruiters, you know how to help somebody find a job, right? So as alumni placement agents and helping people out, building alumni network is a second idea that I think is really resonating, and we've seen lots of really good examples. And then last but not least, pipelining, talent pipelining. This is another very good way to lean in, right? Don't pipeline with your recs, right? So small note to anybody in recruiting: if you have job posted on your website that you're not hiring for, please go right now in your ATS and unpost those jobs, because it's unfair to the job seekers, right? If you want a pipeline, there's a good way to do this. It's called a talent pool. You get people to sign in, you nurture them. It's a CRM. It's all good, but don't use a job for that. It's not good, right? But right now, pipelining is important.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, Jerome. That's exactly, that last comment's a great one on the pipelining. And I would echo what Jerome said. I love the TA leaders can take that internal place. I love to talk about it from a standpoint of a marketplace. Your internal, most companies, there's many of them. I mean, J&J's on the phone are so large, they have their own marketplace. They have their own kind of movement of people. And I think about it in a sense that the job is to put the best talent in the seat and to help people move around. And the more TA can think about it that way and get tools, I think it's great. And, we're seeing people think differently also. We're seeing kind of the conversation change and the dialogue change. And I think that's one of the big themes. We all are going through change. And the more we embrace that and the more we kind of look at how do we change and adapt? I think it's going to create opportunities for everybody and to kind of think of things differently. Then I'd add simplicity. I think from a provider perspective, one of the things I hear, and Jason probably has a lot more to say on this, and I'm sure Jerome hears this, but it's how do you continue to make your offering simple for the people taking it? Because that's what we think all day. If we're not simple and can turn it on, we don't want people thinking about what's it like to implement. We want to create the usage and let people try it and feel the product before they kind of have to go through it. So I think anywhere we can keep things simple, both us as providers and then internally, you as providers to your customers and your companies, that's key. It's all about that experience, both sides of the equation.
I love and agree with everything you guys are saying. I want to take it back to the original kind of concept here. Like when you think about the business case, we've always dealt with historical budgets for traditional line items like headcount, advertising, marketing, branding, things like that. Internal mobility, reskilling, upskilling are on the newer side of that. So how are you guys thinking about that from a business case standpoint? Maybe Jason, you want to lead off there?
Yeah, I really think, where the focus was on cost per hire, external cost per hire, we're putting equal dollars to internal, to the programs you just talked to. I mean, we have numerous programs about how do we redeploy our talent? How do we grow skill sets? How do we look at the skills of our employees across our business lines, right? And so some of our complexity is just learning our business. And you have people that know your business that are sitting in seats today, looking for that opportunity and that growth opportunity. And so, I really feel that, deploying assets and marketing and really expense to our internals is equally as important as our externals.
Awesome.
Yeah. And now is a good time to actually break down the silos and the barriers, right? Great example, I was talking to a large enterprise customer the other day, and they'd been fighting for years on simple internal mobility rules. And their biggest barrier to internal mobility was, prior to applying to an internal job, you shall inform your boss.
Yeah.
Which is like, okay, and if I apply to a competitor, do I inform my boss? No, right? So why should I inform my boss? Of course, at some point you do want the manager to be informed, but do I need to inform him before really? And this had been a debate for years. And then in the wake of this, it's like, yeah, let's be bold. We need this. And they just remove the requirement. And now suddenly internal hiring is just blossoming, right? So I think you have the opportunity to simplify your processes as well and create change and be bold in your choices.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, Jerome. I like to say there's a talent marketplace happening every day outside of your walls, created inside. It's, it's going to happen. The phones are ringing. So how do you make those phones ring in your own building versus outside?
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually have a somewhat related question, but maybe Bob, since you just spoke up, you and everyone on the panel actually work with a lot of the largest companies, and Jason works with one of the largest companies in the world. What advice would you have for smaller or high growth companies who don't have the infrastructure in place relative to navigating these waters today?
When you say don't have the infrastructure as far as tech or navigating around?
I mean, in terms of historical perspective, in terms of technology, in terms of awareness and benchmark data and the like.
I think I think first is this, from my perspective, mid-sized, smaller companies taking that leap and taking that risk and trying new things is absolutely where they have an advantage, I think. Unlike, some of the bigger companies, it's, Jerome referenced it, changing policies, moving things. And I think now is a better time than ever. Is sometimes I like to say, let's not overthink things. Let's kind of try and move forward and keep that ball moving forward, because, most times, especially if you're a smaller company getting a lot of the input from your employees, it's going to be something that's going to resonate with them. And how do you kind of shift that and move that very quickly? And, and kind of go with that 80-20 rule. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let's move. And I think sometimes that gets in the way also, is that as you're navigating through things, especially now with, there's a lot of unknown and where are we going, but how do you kind of go with that 80-20 and just keep the momentum moving forward versus standing still right now? I think that's something I'd raise for everybody, that I think at this moment in time, we like to refer to it internally as the offensive mode. Fix the things inside your own shop, get the things that you are all the things that internally bother you or you needed to fix. Just like the larger companies are thinking, and what Jason talked about, how can you do that in your own company so that as we start to move forward and get to a place where the world gets to some next normality, what that may be, you're in a great position to move forward and you're ready.
Awesome. I'm going to slightly pivot, maybe take it back to Jason. So ROI, from an ROI standpoint, when you're thinking about products that represent a relatively new category in HR tech, so there's not an incumbent, there are, few markers for success. So like, what proxies are you looking at? What processes do you consider in general? And then in the light of the last few months?
I think in a lot of ways, we're buying the potential, and we're looking at partners that we feel are going to invest in their roadmap and get us there. We're investing in innovation. To your point, we can't always move that quick. You can, right? And so I do think in the light of COVID, we've been moving much faster than normal or average, I would say. I don't know if normal is a word anymore. But it's really about looking for those experience wins. It's not always the quantitative, it's the qualitative. And are there things that will eventually build capacity for us to do others? Are there ways that we're going to create some form of competitive advantage by taking a chance versus staying with the processes and living within our own comfort zone? So, I know we were really focused on dollars and cents in this meeting, but with innovation and taking a chance, I think the risk factor is, can we lean on the experience lever to really deliver?
Yeah, we were pretty thoughtful about like dollars and SEN versus CENTS, because it's more than just our financial bottom line. Maybe from that standpoint, Bob or Jerome, maybe Jerome, you want to kick us off. From the qualitative standpoint, how do you make that business case, especially today when it's not about dollars and CENTS?
Yeah, I think you make the case. You make a case for better hiring. It's just a more difficult case, right? And the case for better hiring, we call this hiring success, the ability to hire amazing talent on demand. Great. Every CEO in the world would like to have that, right? Mm-hmm. And so how do you actually achieve hiring success? And how do you measure hiring success? And historically, we've measured recruiting on what? Faster and cheaper. Cost per hire, time to fill. Go faster, cheaper, faster, cheaper. But that's actually not a business case, right? Because you can make it faster and cheaper. It doesn't make it better. And so we're actually, I think, consider revamping your hiring metrics to 3 simple metrics on cost, quality, and time. Hiring budget replaces the cost per hire and is expressed as a percentage of new hire salary. So you can say, I'm investing 5% of my new hire salary in those hirings. I'm investing 11% of those hires. How does that compare to my competitors, rather than say, I'm spending $2,327 per hire, which is, no C-suite person cares about it. Second, replace your time to fill by hiring velocity. Very simple. Hiring velocity is the percentage of jobs that are filled on time. As a CEO, if your time to fill is 57 days, I'll tell you honestly, I really don't care. Like, start earlier, right? But if you tell me that my business velocity is 90%, then I know that if I want to invade Belgium, usually I say because I'm French, then the soldiers are going to be there on the day of invasion, right? And because hiring velocity translates into business velocity. So start tracking your hiring budget, your hiring velocity, and last but most importantly, start tracking your quality. And the quality of hire, we'll measure it 2 years later or based on the performance and and nobody actually does it. So we've introduced a net hiring score, which works like an NPS, very simple. 90 days after a hire, you ask the manager on a scale of 1 to 10, how much of a fit is this candidate? And you ask the candidate on a scale of 1 to 10, how much of a fit is this job, right? And then you take the ones who are like, the 9 and 10s, minus the ones that are like, made a mistake, the 1 to 5, and you obtain, just like an NPS, a positive, negative score that tells you, are you hiring more great fits than poor fits? This is a really fast way to do it, and it's very scary. The first time we did it, we actually ended up with, in 52% of hires, either the manager or the candidate said, mistake. Like, you take this to the CEO and say, 52% of your hires are actually not great. what kind of company are you building? So if you want to make a business case towards recruiting being a value add function, it's a harder to make today than it was a year ago, by the way, right? Because people are like, yeah, I don't care about improvement, I want savings. But assuming you do want to make that positive business case, I would rely on that hiring velocity and net hiring score to speak to the improvements of recruiting, and hiring budget as the measured investment that you're making to achieve those goals.
Yeah, those are great.
Keep going, Bob.
Those are great. And Jerome, I'd ask you, we did something similar where we said to folks, I love the net hiring score, the NPS score for hiring, because that's this quality of hire, everybody wants it, and it's so far out. Have you, as people are doing that, is the reception going well on your end? I know, just to kind of unpack that a little bit, we're doing similar thing, and that's, I think, what a lot of TA folks kind of run into. How do I prove quality of hire and the acceptance rate of doing that? Because basically we're going to judge how you did right out of the gate, which is okay. And it's not just the recruiter. There's a whole process around that I think the recruiting teams and the people inside can help unpack that to say, where do they improve when those scores come back immediately? No different than if you're running a consumer business and you do NPS on your consumers. So I think it just ties right back to the business when you do that.
Yeah, and I think, just from my standpoint, I think just these sort of historical general points of measurement are very flawed. You start to kind of lean into, let's say, time to hire, as you mentioned, Jerome. We're measuring things like time to first candidate submission, time to candidate slate submission, percentage of hiring manager accepted candidates. These are the elements, the subset, sub-bullets essentially, that are important to really lean in and dig in to measure some of those velocity metrics. So totally agree with everyone. I'm going to pivot really quickly. Jason, so when you think about the HR tech landscape today, it's a pretty noisy space. So how do you think about prioritization, not only within just outside of what you've invested in, but also within your current tech stack?
Yeah. So I kicked it off with governance being a strong pillar of moving forward, and at J&J, I oversee the entire HR portfolio. So it's not just within one silo. We really have all functions representing to help us select the right technology, making sure that the technology and the ecosystem's aligned, make sure it's optimizing, make sure our products, and we look at all of our technologies as products, have roadmaps, and making sure that those roadmaps are dovetailed, not just from what our vendors are rolling out, but what we are rolling out and what we're passing out to our populations. So I come back to governance. It's extremely important. It's keeping us honest. It's keeping us aligned. It's keeping some of that rogue purchasing and the products that were sometimes viewed as specialty, or we had to have them. It's allowing us to focus on the bigger picture and making sure that our systems are connected, they're optimized, we have the foundation, we have the right data lineage passing to our platforms. And on the back end, it's making sure that we have the reporting to make sure we can measure our technologies and our platforms to make sure that we're utilizing them appropriately and getting the experience out of them. So I really come back to the governance comment that I made earlier, but you have to pull it together and you have to look at it as a portfolio of products and a true ecosystem.
Cool. Okay, I have one last toss-up question for anyone who wants to kick it off. But in light of everything that's going on between focus around diversity, inclusion, and distributed workforces, and concern about employee health and wellness, how are you all thinking about decision making around both investment and overall focus in light of everything over the last few months?
I'm happy to take. Yeah, I'm happy to take it. I mean, I think we. So for starters, we collectively here got into this line of work because we believe in connecting people to jobs. And right now, hundreds of millions of people have actually lost their job. And so the way I look at it, we've just become a lot more important than we were a year ago. Right? And so I think it's a time for us to actually really step up. And I mean this, right? It's like I said earlier, like, is the time now to upgrade your infrastructure? And, right now we are seeing companies that, like, we just signed and kicked off a project with a large fashion retailer, 140,000 employees around the world, right? And we're like, and they're so we sell an ATS replacement, right? So we're not like selling something that you can hide some misery on the side. Like, we're not selling lipstick on the pig. We're actually replacing the pig. And so you actually have to do the entire plumbing, right? So it's a big project. But at the same time, they're like, yeah, all our stores are closed. Now is the right time. Let's go, right? Because finally, if you don't have the right basic infrastructure, if you don't have something simple, all my jobs and all my candidates are in one system where the majority of the recruitment activity is tracked. If you cannot say this is true, because the majority of the recruitment activity happens in email and in spreadsheet, because the managers are not using it, because the candidate don't want to apply, because the recruiters are not productive, because it's not connected between your systems, because you have a Frankenstein architecture like many companies have built over the years on top of their ATS. If you don't have that, like, you really cannot step it up. And so I think now is the time to be bold, and the business case can be made. They can be made financially, they can be made for quality, but it's a time to be bold. It's to be bold for yourself, to be bold internally, and to be bold externally on the market, and step up for people who are job seekers.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think we're in that similar vein. It's one, I said this earlier, do the things inside your product to just add simplicity, make it better. And some inside, your engineers or whoever maybe have time. We kind of looked at that. And then we looked at our roadmap and what's most important. Jerome said it. Talent is not going away. It's the world of talent is changing. We talked about marketplace. We're doing a lot of investment around a marketplace. We're talking to more partners now because no one company has every solution. It's not like we're going to walk in and say, we could solve your problems. But you start to talk to a few folks and say, how can you bring those together right now during this time? And what can we do differently? How can we create, take what we do and match it with learning and help people get learning pathways? So you start to think about, what's going to happen to displaced workers? How do we then help those folks and kind of get their new careers? A lot of organizations we're talking to right now, yes, they stopped hiring. If you're in retail or you're in a service industry, but one thing they know and they're thinking about is it's going to come back. And when it comes back, it's going to go like a hockey stick. So am I ready for that? So we're talking about how do we help them ready themselves and get in front of that so that we're not sitting waiting. We're kind of with them. We're kind of going on the journey with a lot of clients and investing what we're hearing and what they need, so they're ready for that. So I think it's adapting to the new norm, and really, and I like what Jerome said, it's bold. It's not sit idle and look and say what's going to happen. We know people need one. We know people want to be engaged. We know people want to be employed, and we know that they're going to look for some direction. How can we all collectively help in that ecosystem and help talent get their next opportunity and see their potential and move forward?
Awesome. Hey, Jason, any final words from you?
I think that the uptick right now is, as we focus on our foundation and we drive more value, I think we're all going to come out of this much stronger, and our technology platforms are going to be more cohesive and connected. And I think this is a win for our space overall. I really believe it.
Yeah, I would echo that 10 times. Right now, if there's any time that HR organizations, recruiters, everybody can take a front seat and really step up, this is it. I mean, this is where we can make a difference and help and do all the right things right now for the organizations.
Awesome. Well, Jason, Bob, Jerome, thank you all so much for your time today. Before we wrap, I just have to take a quick PSA. So the expo hall is now open. So you need to click on, for the folks that are listening in, you need to click on the expo button on the navigation on the left. There you can speak directly and learn more about some of our technologies that are being represented here today. And you can actually share your audio and video at the booth and have a real conversation. So take some time and enjoy the rest of the next 45 minutes and take this time to learn some more. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Bob, Jason.